Hey everyone, Amiya here from Resonance Astrology, and welcome to my podcast series, Meet the Planets. We're recording this on August 18th at around 3:13 Central European Time, and this episode is going to be all about the sun, and I am joined by Colly this time around, aka the Barista Witch. So, hi there.
Hi.
Yeah, do you want to do a small introduction?
Oh yeah, for sure. My name's Colly. I'm an astrologer, tarot reader, newly into alchemy, a barista. I've been studying astrology for 5 years now. I'm in the Nightlight School of Astrology with Adam Ellenboss, but I dabble, I've recently been really inspired by Kira Ryberg's work and been getting kind of more into the decans and the storytelling mythos part of astrology. So I'm really excited to talk about the sun as a planet that we all should foster a relationship to.
Absolutely. What are your sun credentials, just so people know?
Sure. I'm a Capricorn rising with my sun in the first house. And I also have the ruler of my ascendant, Saturn and Aries, in the decan of the sun. So those are my main credentials. I also have my moon in the third decan of Sag, which is also the decan of the sun.
Yeah, yeah. Here we love the Decans. Anybody that watches this channel knows we are doing the Decan series, which is called the Decan Dance. So, so I really love that. And yeah, the Decans are actually also a great way to get to know the sun, like following the sun through the Decans. But we're probably going to talk about that a bit later on. And as for me, my sun is like right on my ascendant, so it's like a very important planet in my life as well. And I'm very excited to talk about it. So, yeah, let's get into it. I think one thing we did with the moon, and I think we can kind of do with the sun here, just because both of them are luminaries, right? So they're like we say they are planets, but like technically the correct term is to call them luminaries in astrology terms. And just to have like a bit of a comparison between the sun and the moon, because again, these are the only planetary bodies that work on that luminary basis. So, what do you kind of have to say here?
Yeah, I think it's, essential to understand the sun with its relationship to the moon, because they do this dance and they are the only luminaries, right? I mean, the sun is really the only light giver and the moon is the receiver. Um, Something that Adam talks about in year one of Nightlight Astrology that I just like think about every day casually, is understanding the moon as like the circumstance or the setting of the life, if we're looking at a natal chart, but also if we're looking at a moment in time with like electional astrology, and the sun as more of like the focus or the plot line. And I think that's really interesting. It gives us a lot to kind of like tease out in terms of what, if we're talking about building a relationship with these planets, we can observe or do to have more of that awareness. And yeah, just take more from our lived experiences and sit with them. The sun as the only planet, that does not move, so to say, like it
Mhm.
guides us, right? Like it's that symbol of leadership. And the moon is a different kind of leadership, I would say, right? Matriarchy, patriarchy.
Yeah.
We move in cycles, and that's just as powerful, even if it's not a radiant vitality kind of thing. Times of rest can be signaled by the waning moon, times of growth by the waxing full moon, etc. So, yeah.
Yeah, and they do so much together, right? It's like they kind of work as a pair so well, right? Because the moon obviously is the reflective light from the sun, and this is how the moon phases kind of come along. And it's also like the new moon happens right when the sun and the moon meet together, when they conjoin together. And then when the full moon is in the sky, it's when they're opposite one another. So they kind of always work as these opposing forces. And I always like it when you can see the sunset. It doesn't always happen, but when you can see the sunset and when at the same time you can already see the moon up in the sky. And I just always feel like, oh, the lovers are meeting up there. So I really like the interplay of them, which I think a lot of astrology is kind of really based upon that, like the interplay of light and darkness. And that's actually also something I took from Adam's class back then when I took it. Like that kind of really the essence of astrology and really the seasons are kind of based around like the sun's journey and like if it's the light of the light half of the year or if it's the dark of the light half of the year. So a lot of things are very dependent on what the sun is kind of doing. And so also kind of really what we based astrology upon. At least a lot of Western astrology here and in the Northern Hemisphere, right? Like a lot of things are really based on like how what the nature is doing. And also the cycles, right? Because when we celebrate the equinoxes and the solstices, this is like, okay, what's the sun doing? We're celebrating the sun either gaining more brightness in the sky or the sun kind of waning and it getting darker, so to say. And I put quotes because there's nothing like brightness doesn't equal good and darkness doesn't equal bad or anything like that. It's just the interplay, so to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the sun, in terms of what you were saying, like kind of setting the tone of astrology, like the zodiac specifically, like all of those significations we take from or we associate with Aries and Taurus and Gemini and Cancer come from what the sun is doing at that time in the year, right? So you referenced like the light of the light. That would be that first section of the zodiac, Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, when the sun is increasing, right? We've got steady light during fixed Taurus season. We've got the initiation of the light at the beginning of Aries of the vernal or astrological equinox. And
Yeah.
then the solstice, or sorry, skip Gemini. Don't let them know. Then we have the increase, right? Where all both of the I love this fact. Both of the signs ruled by Mercury, Gemini and Virgo, come right before that interplay of light. You know, Mercury being the god of the underworld, goes retrograde the most, can like dance between worlds. So all of the associations, and then we layer that with the planets too, come from literally what is the sun doing. So to go back to, you know, Adam's association, the sun is the purpose or the plot line of the life. It's kind of like, you know, really like like creating the structure of the play, right? Like what is the literal stage that you're on? Like that's the sun. And the moon being the reflector of the sun's light is kind of like the vibe curator, right? Like it's kind of setting the tone for like how are we moving on that stage. You know, the moon's also associated with the body in a lot of literature. um, and I think that's really interesting too, to think about. There's a difference in how we move in our bodies and how the you know, environment is set up around us. Like sometimes it can feel like it's the time to do this relative to maybe what the moon is doing, but sometimes, you know, the plot line doesn't actually take us there, and we have
Yeah.
this struggle. I really like thinking about it as Vidius Valens has this quote of the sun as the noetic light, which I had to Google that word. Noetic means it comes from the Greek word gnosis, and so it has to do with like this inner knowing, kind of like this like connection to spirit, right? Sun's also the lot of spirit, and the moon is the reflective light. So there's like this balance of like taking in the circumstance around us and moving, and then also connecting to that, you know, solar gnosis of I'm here for this purpose. And that guides me too.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, the sun just obviously symbolizes something very steady because the moon is constantly moving, right? And that's why it rules over the realm of fate and fortune, which is our circumstances that are always changing and shifting. And the sun is this like steady thing that we are like constantly kind of going towards this. Yeah, I think that's why people also say like go towards the light. Like it's this golden path we are trying to follow. And again, the our cosmic system like revolves around the sun, so it's like the heart, so to say. And that's why obviously it makes so much sense like that Leo, which is ruled by the sun, would also in bodily ways rule over the heart region and all of that. So the sun is really the heart of our cosmic system, and I think that's why it's also so important to connect to the sun. And I know that, like, as astrologers nowadays, usually, because people always tell us our sun sign, their sun signs, right? And so, mostly my job is to be like, hey, you're more than your sun sign. Like, there's so much more to it. Your sun sign is probably not that important. And at the same time, I also want to like highlight the importance of the sun itself here, just because it is like the base of so many things. And at the end, like the planets revolve around the sun. This is how we get the synodic cycles. So the sun is like so extremely important for the existence of astrology and everything that's based upon that. Yeah. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
When you were speaking, I just thought about exactly how many people I've had to be like, wait, hold on. Like your sign is Gemini, but let's look deeper. And they're gonna watch us and be like, what are you doing? But
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, no,
Yeah.
the sun is important. The sun is like, it's so funny that this like part of pop culture has become like, what's your sun sign? And Linda Goodman signs. And like, yeah, just thinking about, when planets in the chart are too close to the sun, they burn them out, right? Like you can't see them,
That's
they
true.
become
That's
invisible.
true.
And who's to blame the sun? Like she's that girl. Like she's that bright. And yeah, let's give her moment right now and talk about her until we can't.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's obviously, I guess both of us have the sun in the first house. So like the sun is gonna have a different importance than for somebody that has the sun, I don't know, in the sixth house or like where it's not like that visible. So depending on, or maybe you're a Leo rising, then of course, like your chart ruler is the sun. So it's gonna have a different type of importance in your life. Or maybe the sun is like in a very prominent, like 10th house, right on the MC or something like that position. So it varies, but I think everybody can build relationships to all of the planets. And actually, especially even if you don't have a strong sun, it might be even more important to build a relationship to that planet. But I would say equally for me, as somebody that has the sun right on the ascendant, it was still so important for me to build that relationship because I guess I have that like Scorpio sun, so it's not the most comfortable position, right? It's like Scorpio rising and then like I have this bright light right on my ascendant, even though my natural instinct is to not really necessarily want to go into the spotlight. So it was very important for me to build that relationship to, yeah, like visibility and kind of what the sun is known for. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, having a Capricorn sun, I think well, also square Saturn and Aries, there's this element that I have with visibility that comes from a struggle with like restraint of impatience, like not like understanding that finding the right light takes time, you know, like finding your comfort in the light takes time. Just like this element of similarly, like I enjoy being in the spotlight, I enjoy seeing myself on camera, but like I also have to figure out where's the niche of it all, you know?
Oh yeah.
Um, and yeah, Capricorn also wants to do things sustainably. So I think that's always in the back of my mind too, is before I always jump into things like my Saturn and Aries wants to, I have to really take a few months to think about if that's gonna last me, or you get burnt out. So,
Yeah, yeah, that is true. I think one way we can kind of get to know the sun is by talking about dignities, which we can maybe kind of get into right now. The dignities scheme is really like where the sun is doing well and maybe not so well. And this is how we can get to know a planet better. For like domicile, which is Leo. the sun is ruled by Leo. That's where it's at home. Then we have the exaltation of the sun, which is in Aries. The detriment of the sun is going to be what is opposite of the domicile. So it's going to be Aquarius. And then the fall is what's opposite of the exaltation. So the sun is in its fall in Libra. But let's first talk about like the domicile of Leo, because that's kind of where we're at right now, right? The sun is in Leo right now in its last few days. Soon it's going to enter Virgo, but hey, it's still in Leo. So yeah.
Yeah. Also, the first decan of Virgo is ruled by the sun, I believe. So she's got a little bit more dignity as she goes in there. Um, yeah, the sun in Leo, light bringer. I always love Leo suns. They're people when you're in a room with them, when you're at a party with them, they're always, kind of like emanating that like warmth. And they sometimes, get that bad rap of being a little bit too showy, a little bit too vain. But I think a lot of that comes from wanting people to feel comfortable through, you know, um, seeing them as very comfortable in their own personality, purpose, right? Light, self, etc. So the sun in Leo, even thinking about it like astronomically, what is the sun doing at that time? We've got steady light, middle
Mhm.
of summer, like we've been like building since, well, I guess technically the, summer equinox, the light starts to get dimmer day by day, but we've got that visibility up very high in the sky ever since. And as we approach Virgo, it then starts to more visibly, more rapidly go down. But in terms of day to day, the sun is very steady. We've got growth, all this like cultivation of corn knee high in July. I love about that. Sunflowers, all these yellow, solar plants all around my town. I actually don't know if echinacea has anything to do with, I don't know what planet it's associated with. But I always think flowers just in general. I know they're Venusian, but they've got petals that look like the sun, and like all the bumblebees are just so happy. My 2-year-old calls flowers the bumblebee's home. So I think that's quite solar too.
Yeah, wait, I was just, I mean, obviously, okay, it's Google, so I, you know, but just because I was wondering, so the first thing that comes up, it's with Neptune, but I don't like associating flowers so much with outer planets, to be
Mhm.
completely honest. But I definitely could see some sort of like sun rulership there. I mean, sunflower is very obvious, of course, but the rest, yeah. Yeah, I like that. I should probably know more. I took Sage Pophams like 1 year astroherbalism class, but it's been a while. Um, yeah. Yeah, I also think riffing off of you with if we think of yeah, what like Leo as a sign, it's fixed fire. Like what is fixed fire but the sun that is literally fixed fire in the middle of our uh cosmos, so to say. So it makes very sense. And then it also makes so much sense, like the stereotype of Leos feeling like the world evolves around them. Well, it's hard, like if you're ruled by the thing that everything revolves around to not feel like that sometimes. And so I definitely feel like there's just this beautiful steadiness, and also kind of the promise of like the sun, which always rises again the next day. We kind of take that for granted, I feel like. But like, let's maybe not take it for granted, like the sun sets and rises every day. And that's very beautiful. And I also, that's like a bit of a personal story, but that was like when I was first time connecting a bit more to the sun. And like I went out on a walk. I don't know what was going on. Like there was something with the sun. I don't remember what transit exactly it was, but I remember just like looking at the sun and then I was just like, damn, I don't know, like we just like take granted that this ball of energy like comes up every day and the sun just keeps on shining. Like if we see it, if we curse it because like it's too hot or we're sad about it because it's too cold and we don't see it, the sun just keeps on doing its thing, like showing up every day if we care about it or not. And I feel like that's so telling also of like Leo energy and Leo people of like this quality of just like consistently like showing up and like shining their light, so to say. Um, and so and that's why the sun is in its domicile there.
Absolutely, yeah. I watch a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race, and so I might make some references as we go
That's
through
totally fine.
the form of reality TV I'm currently consuming. I love reality TV. I think that's very solar also. Um, but anyways, I think a lot about Leo in terms of like we just got to make it work, you know? Like you were saying, there's like this great comfort and consistency that Leo embodies. And there's also like this awareness of like it won't always feel comfortable to be in the light, but it's about how you make it work, right? Like on RuPaul's Drag Race, for example, like have a challenge and the challenge is to like do quick drag makeup and do some like buffoonery on the screen. Like you don't necessarily want to be known or seen as that goofy creature when you're like this glamazon drag queen or whatever, but it's about having fun, right? And I think
Mhm,
that's where Leo really, that's where like that wisdom is in that solar power is like if you're only focused on having fun, like the rest will fall into place because that breeds consistency, right? If like you're just going with what is like creatively fulfilling, everything after that will also be authentic, right? Which is another great word
mhm.
to associate with the sun in general, but certainly in Leo, it just comes more naturally. Another like good astronomical literalism of that is the sun rises during Leo season before we can even think about it, before we can even wake up.
Mm,
The sun is already up, right? Like
that's
it's
true,
just
yeah.
making it work. Like, and same with the sun setting. Like we've done our whole day, depending on where you are, I guess, equator. But mostly we've done our whole day and then finally the sun is setting. So it's like really like giving us such a great opportunity to just like you like seize the day or whatever as much as possible during Leo season. Inverse, compare that to Aquarius season where I'm in Vermont, the sun doesn't rise until like
Oh
8:30 or something, and then it's down by 4. So like I get to work and the sun just comes up,
yeah.
and by the time I go to pick up my daughter, it's like down, and I'm like, well, great. Like, what are we gonna do now? You know? So it really
Yeah.
changes what also you have for opportunities to have fun, to connect, to be creative, to shine your light.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah, there's actually like the part of reality. I don't watch so much reality TV. If I do, it's usually Korean stuff. Regardless, I think it's so interesting because like one of the big things there is like your image, which is so solar. It's like you're like how do people perceive you? Like the first thing they see about you and like how you show up. And there's like ways that you can be smart about that or not, or I don't know. Like I feel like, first you just watch reality TV and then like, you see things and you judge blah 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 blah. But if you go like deeper into it, it's like you have to have a certain smartness of like how you show up and what you do or what you don't do or what you say or what you don't say, because that's gonna give you like popularity or not, and like in what like role you position yourself in, if you're gonna be the villain or all of that. And so I think that's extremely fascinating to me. Um, yeah, because like I'm right now I'm thinking because it was like it's airing right now, but I'm not watching that. But there was like this like survival show. Korea is a big on survival shows. I don't mean Squid Game. I mean like to like to form a idol group. So they had this thing called like Boys Planet a few years ago, the first season. And so basically the way you show up and the way you have like like your popularity is going to determine if you're kind of going to like end up making it into that group or not, because it's based on like how the judges perceive you, but it's also based on like public votes, so how people perceive you. Um, and that for me is extremely interesting because it started off with like 100 people or something like that, and only nine made it, obviously. But yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of like thinking you have, like the first impression, it's that first impression, like that counts. And probably also a bit of like the editing of the staff and how they choose to portray you, which is another thing. That's maybe the sun in its fall in Libra.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I think, in modern astrology, a little underthought how much the sun is associated with the mind. Like we sometimes really conflate that with Mercury, for example. But I have this quote from Valens: "The sun, which is cosmically mind and daemon on account of his own activity and lovely nature, stirring up human souls for undertakings, is established as a cause of action and movement." And you're so right. Like it's about, being deliberate, being authentic,
Hmm.
moving with your thoughts. Like that is what the sun embodies. And another word that you made me think of is like reputation. That is such a good word to associate with solar essence. In reality TV, also in Drag Race, there's like mind games, that people tend to play, where they want to get in each other's head, like season 5, Roxy Andrews, Jinx Monsoon, who is ruled by the moon in Leo. I love Jinx Monsoon. There's this like, Jinx is this innocent little Cancer rising ruled by moon in Leo, like America's sweetheart. And then there's this pageant queen that her entire career, also a very, solar thing, has just gotten where she is by taking other people down a notch. So there's this, spectrum of what it is to be solar, where like you can shine so brightly that you like burn other people's light out, or like you can really come from a place of like authenticity that even if people, are coming for you, or maybe even just like you're misunderstood. I think that's
Hmm.
another spectrum word for what the sun can be. I wonder, as a sun in Scorpio in the first house, that must be a word that maybe resonates a little bit. But yeah, there's like this spectrum of like, well, when we're misunderstood in some ways, maybe in a sun in Aquarius detriment way, it's easier to understand who we're not before we can really access who we are. Saturn ruling Aquarius is, the negatives, not in like a good or bad kind of negative, but what is not is maybe more accessible to someone that's Saturnian in a solar way than someone that's maybe martial even, right? The sun exalting in Aries, it's going to go towards what it wants, deliberately, strategically, relentlessly, unapologetically. I love shameless for a word for Aries. Sun in Aries, literally, right? Like it's that moment that we like everything resets. Like Sun in Leo is, yeah, like make it work,
Yeah.
consistent showgirl. But that Sun in Aries is like, I don't know, that's the director. Like she's in charge. Even if she has never done this before, like she's directing. She's got the camera. Like,
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I was just thinking like we should talk a bit more about the sun in Aries. And again, as you said, and this is like the first like major thing we can see with like the interplay of light and darkness is Aries rules over the spring equinox. The spring equinox means the sun, or basically the light, has officially taken over the dark, so to say, which means that the days are officially getting like longer again than the darker periods. And so like no wonder the sun does extremely well in a position where the light is like at its forefront again and everything's kind of like being reborn. And again, with Aries season, we kind of start the astrological new year. So it's the beginning of something new. And I just really like that position of this exalted sun there. Like I can really just picture it and like this. because the sun is also like a force of vitality, and like life force, um, and like what sustains life. And so with like this rebirthing moment from Pisces into Aries, it makes sense that like Aries is the birth itself, then like a new child, metaphorically, so to say, or a new idea inside yourself, right? Is like being born. Um, yeah, totally. And like now, what do we need to sustain it?
Right. Yeah. I also think a lot about Aries always being the people to go first, right? Or
Mhm.
maybe a more Marsy way to say it is not being afraid to go first. I really resonate with that. I love going first. But also in terms of what does that mean for like a solar expression, you know? Like sometimes it's there's a lot of wisdom in just trying something without a plan, you know, and letting that creativity guide you, right? Like really like push you into that like rebirth moment, as you were saying. And also thinking of the sun as like the mind, like, oh, there was this really, when Chris Brennan did the series on the zodiac signs, there was this quote, I wish I could remember. I'm gonna like paraphrase it, but it was something from Pisces to Aries, as you were saying, like that
Mhm.
rebirth. There's like this daringness to dream as like that like bridge between Pisces and Aries. And I think like, you know, jumping in before you have a plan is often thought of as reckless or naive and so on. But when you layer it with the sun and you think about, as I was saying before, that there's sometimes a lot of opportunity in discomfort. You know, where can you let that fire, that heat, you know, it's warming up during Aries season at the equinox, like be a sign to go rather than to stop and slow. And I also think like I had this quote from Rhetorius with, you know, some info on like why does the sun, you know, exalt in Aries and in Leo. Interestingly, were the places that Saturn is in fall.
Mhm.
So Rhetorius says, we say that it is because the sun is the storehouse of fire and light and is the master of the day, while Kronos, Saturn, signifies darkness and cold. Then at that place where the light of day is exalted, there the darkness and night is depressed. That which is cold is warmed. Sun is depressed, Saturn is exalted. But at the place where darkness is exalted, there the light is depressed and the day becomes shorter. So again, thinking literally about what does the sky look like? Because that's what ancient people cared about, this divination of the sky gives so much of a layer to like, well, what does it feel like to either have the sun in Aries or to move with the moment when the sun is in Aries? It can feel kind of fearful, thinking also in that time about like food storage, right? Like we're planting seeds literally at this time, but
Yeah.
we're also starting to run low on the food that we've had from winter. So there's this like moment of Mars again, right, ruling Aries, scarcity of like, I have to forage. Like maybe it's time to hunt, right? As the animals start to like come out of their caves and whatever. I don't know
Mhm.
what animals. Yeah. I love Aries.
Yeah, yeah, it's I mean obviously both Mars signs are survivalistic in their own ways. But in Aries it's really that because it's that young energy, right? That masculine energy, so to say, which is more outwardly focused, which again is, as you said, I feel like that hunting aspect makes so much sense. It doesn't have to be literal hunting, but it's also like in ourselves, you know, just you if you've been following the seasons, maybe even not consciously, but springtime, usually there is a process of like hunger, like inner hunger of like, I want to do something. I want to go out and set out and do something. And also like a bravery, right? And a lot of like the courage, right, which we see in Leo, but definitely also in Aries, is like the capacity to not be fearless, but like look fear right in the eye and do it regardless. And I feel like that's also where like the sun quality shines through. And I always think of the sun as like, know thyself and know yourself or just be yourself. That's like, that's so much easier said than done. Because knowing yourself requires a lot of time. Being in relationship with yourself like varies differently. I mean, literally through the seasons, technically, you know. So, and there's like a trust, I think, and this is why the sun like exalts in the sign of Aries, of like when you know yourself, you feel and like when you take risks, right? Like once you get into the doing of like doing things, then you get to like trust yourself more because you know you can do it. You're like that bitch that can do it. So and I think that's where the like know thyself quality comes from. And again, why the sun just does so extremely well in the sign of Aries. And that courage that we just need to kind of like take that step and like take that leap and be courageous to get to know ourselves in these situations. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You made me think of two words, and one I think will be a good transition to the sun in Libra. Modesty and oh, I might have forgot the other word. Oh, well, let's go with modesty for now
Okay,
because
cool.
I, that was the word that I was going to transition to Libra with as well. So I have this stance on modesty that comes partially actually inspired from Drag Race again. Bob the drag queen is one of my favorite drag queens, and he talked on his season a lot about how, and he has a podcast too where he's talked about this. Modesty is overrated. Like know thyself. Like part of knowing yourself is like knowing where you're powerful. And what in the world is that? Like, how is it helpful to be modest to anyone? Like when you know what you're capable of, like especially when it's like inauthentic. And I will just, I guess, start this off kind of aggressively, where I'm going to say Sun and Libra, that they kind of do struggle with this like inauthentic modesty, where a Sun
Mhm.
in Aries, maybe they get kind of showboaty. Maybe it can come off as a little bit like tone it down, etc. But I think there's so much wisdom in just like, saying what you're good at and like doing it. Like just go for it. I think when we operate with this idea of social niceties and keeping the peace and like oh I have to like wait my turn, which are all very like on the forefront of a Libra's mind. We at we like what am I trying to say? We don't allow ourselves to have the opportunity to do that like learning as you go thing that there's
Mhm.
so much wisdom in, Like I am not going to tell my 2-year-old, for example, that you probably can't, I don't know, for example, climb that tree all the way to the top yet. I'm gonna let her try within safety, right? But like, how is it helpful for me to be like, oh, no, 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 you should really go climb that one that's much more your size? Like when we don't allow people to dream and like, say like, oh, no, like she will confidently point at numbers like in a parking lot and be like, that's 8, right? And it's like 2. But like, I just love that she's growing up with this confidence to be like, oh, no, 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 I know this, I know this. Even if it's not there, you can't like, that takes a long time to learn, like to really like move with that, like, it's like equal parts determinism and confidence. There's, I guess, what's the opposite of modesty that's not a negative word? Is there one?
I don't know. I would probably have to like Google see if there's something. I'm
Maybe
not
like
sure.
audacity in a good way.
Hmm. I could
Yeah,
vibe with that, yeah.
like having the audacity to just like believe in yourself in a world, especially like femme people, for POC people, anybody that's marginalized, and we could bring this back to Aquarius as a sign very associated with the margins and Saturn.
Yeah,
To move with that audacity is a tool. And to build a relationship with the sun, I think allows us to kind of get a clue on that a little bit more.
100%. Yeah, I think a lot of why the sun is in its fallen Libra is yeah, because there's like this projected image of perfection, which is not the actual thing. It's just what is projected. Um, Again, as an object, you could say with Libra, of like what is desirable societally, and let me like move into that with the hopes of gaining popularity or something like that, you know? I mean, Libra is very like socially smart and aware. You know, there's a reason why Venus and Saturn do extremely well in Libra, but it's not the sun. It's not the sun. But there's like really this awareness, and this is, I mean, and we can literally bring that back to reality TV as well here, of like the smartness of being what you think people want you to be. But then it's like at what cost, you know? Because usually it's like you suffer internally then privately because you're not actually expressing who you truly are. You're just going with opinions you think people will like you based off on. And this is where like Libra and again, the sun like really struggles with. And the same can be said for Aquarius, obviously not in the exact same way. Aquarius is a lot less socially smart, and I don't even I don't even mean that in a mean way, but I just mean like I have Jupiter in Aquarius. You too, right? You're yeah, we're the same year. But because like I'm thinking like, okay, well, Libra has like Venus as its domicile ruler and Saturn exalted. Aquarius has just Saturn. There's no Venus that does well there. So there's like this lack of like social awareness, or I could just say like the connectivity aspect. And this is why like we can see the mad scientist archetype with Aquarius, because it requires this like dissociation from your humanness, so to say, to go on about like doing certain things. And what's extremely interesting about Aquarius is that like it can understand humans so deeply, but it has such a hard time actually being human. It's like, oh yeah, like I love humanity. I really like, you know, I want to bring humanity to the next level, but I don't know how to cook food for myself. And I think this is too, again, where we can just see like the sun in its fall. And with both of them, I feel like there's a both of these signs cringe at the fact that they cannot be perfect, that they can like not reach a perfection. Aquarius in a way where it's like, I can never be this perfect human that like doesn't have any emotions and is just like, you know, the best science project ever or however. And Libra, like, I can never be this perfect, socially acceptable person ever. And so, and this is where we, again, we see the sun struggling there really hard. It's like there's a wish for this golden path and this image to go towards, but it's never actually like feasible or reachable. Because being human means being flawed. And both of them hate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting to think about Aquarius as, the decans. Aquarius does rule, or sorry, Venus does rule that first decan, which is where I have my Venus. And it also has triplicity, right? Like, because Venus in Libra is an air sign. And I think you're absolutely right. With Aquarius, it's a little different in terms of where that cringe comes from. You said like mad scientists and so on. I think of it a lot as archetyping. And
Mhm.
Kira Ryberg on one of her podcasts recently said that the middle decan of Aquarius she associates as the astrologer decan, because it's ruled by Mercury too. And yeah, dude, when I think about where I struggle, I have my Venus and my Mars and my Uranus conjunct my Mars in Aquarius and Jupiter. Where I struggle, very related to astrology too, is I want to be able to, archetype things. I want to be able to understand
Mm,
them. It's like sort of
yeah.
abstract, functional, way. And where solar power really struggles with that is we're really lacking that audacity, Like when we just try to be aloof, right? Or detach ourselves from reality. Um, Not speaking in like a psychotic break moment, but like in terms of like I can somehow ever be separate from the thing I create, the people I love, the places I live. That's just not how it works, you know? So there's this like missing piece where I think people with the sun in Aquarius or the sun in Libra have to kind of go through these lived experiences, related to purpose or plot line that reminds them that, visibility being a solar thing is also wrapped up in vulnerability, right?
Mm,
And vitality and eminence. And sometimes it can feel really, really vulnerable to, have a reputation, to be so visible, because you're worried about social cohesion, right? For Libra, or you're worried about how systematically does that make sense for Aquarius? And at the end of the day, like the sun as the center of the solar system, the guide of our, path, if you will, we have to trust it. We have to connect to that gnosis, that noetic light, and just like accept that we can't see the sun, like literally we
yeah,
can't look at the sun. And there's some like
that's true.
deep poetic symbolism in that itself. So, and yeah, and I think it is so interesting to think about how those two are different too, where the sun in Aquarius really tries to do that control bit, that Saturn loves. And there's a different kind of control that Libra likes. It's a very like passive aggressive, like I'm not trying to control it. Like if you ever try to
Yeah.
compliment Libra on something and they're like pretending they didn't hear you, or they're like, "Oh, this thing, yeah, I've only been, learning about it for like 10 years and finally did something." Like whereas you talk to an Aries or a Leo about it, they're like, "Yeah, I just picked up a book about it randomly and now I've got a podcast," you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry, I think the internet just got briefly unstable. I'm not sure if it like if you could repeat that Libra part just in case it didn't record well.
From what was the first thing I said?
Uh oh, about like Libra and like somebody complimenting Libra and they're like
Oh,
kind of brushing it off.
yeah, like if you ever compliment a Libra, because they're so worried about that social cohesion, they'll be like, pretending they didn't hear you, or they'll just say like, "Oh, that thing," kind of like shrug it off as if they haven't been studying it for 10 years, or, devoting their whole creative lives,
Yeah,
you know? Um, so it's really different, that kind of like connection to um, visibility as vulnerability, and how do we let other people in our lives see how important that is to us. And I think that's another thing I see with the sun in Libra is they are very, esteemed, and Saturn exalting here, they're very restrained about certain things because they're worried about that connection of it all. And I think that's where that comes from. And there's wisdom in all of it, right? But in terms of where our plot
absolutely.
lines and our lives lead us, there's definitely a solar pattern there for Libras in terms of audacity and visibility.
100%. Yeah, again, they both I like that you brought up archetypes before because it's like both of them, both Aquarius and Libra, would rather try to embody archetypes, and archetypes are not like archetypes are steady things, which is solar in and of itself, you could say. But what they're useful for is like kind of tapping into them, not like becoming them. Like because we are not static, we are changeable, we are mutable by essence. But they're very an interesting force to like tap into and see like even in therapy like Jungian type of analytic settings, like you can analyze things on like an archetypal level, right? Which is like literally the planets are studying archetypes, so to say. But yes, I think this is where they have a a harder time propelling because then Libra is like, oh, I don't know, I gotta embody Persephone. And it's like, okay, maybe you don't have to like fully become that every day of your life 24/7. Like you can just kind of type into that archetype if you want to. And again, and this is I think where the rigidity also shows up because then it'll almost feels like stepping away from that. It's like a mistake and it's like almost like the rug is gonna get swept off and now people are gonna see the real me, and that's terrifying for whatever reason, like for both of them, um, in their own ways. And that's also very interesting if I mean, not even reality, but just like let's take social media, right? Because I feel like Leo and Aries, where they like would excel more, is like they show up as they are. Obviously, social media is always going to be a bit warped as much as we like show up as our authentic selves. You know, it's not going to be exactly the same as when we are alone in our room. But generally, like there's an urge to like be truly authentic. And then Libra Aquarius, kind of show up how they think they would maybe gain more traction or whatever. And what's interesting is that, then when something happens and their like true selves comes out, this is when like cancellations happen. So it's like they almost bite themselves in the in their own back by like trying to be something they're not fully. And then, the obvious thing happens. Um, People maybe put them on a pedestal, right? Because like if you try to embody an archetype and people see you as an archetype and you're like not that archetype, well then. Yeah, so this is kind of what we have here. And again, that pedestaling quality is an interesting thing that can happen to both of them in different ways. Um, yeah, and also interesting, right? That this sun does very well in both of these fire signs, right? Because Leo and Aries are both fire signs, and then Aquarius and Libra are both air signs.
Yeah, absolutely. And like thinking about Aries and Leo as the signs where Saturn doesn't do well, like that image of pedestaling, lifting up, right?
Hmm.
Whereas like Saturn wants depth. So like by putting ourselves on a pedestal, thinking too abstractly, thinking too in the stars, too archetypally, we actually like rob ourselves of going rooting within
Hmm.
ourselves, our lived experience, our purpose, our plotline, etc. Which is there's something really interesting to tease out there in terms of like, well, why is Aries and Leo so good at that when Saturn, who is, structure and systems like going down, how does that make sense? I don't know. That's interesting to think about, that image of pedestaling as lifting up. And the sun, the sun wants us to like look up. The sun wants us to
Hmm.
like notice the beauty of the sky and so on. So, but at the same time, the sun is the reason we can't see the stars. So there's like this constant interplay between these signs. Yeah, really interesting. And I think you're so right. I'm so guilty with my Aquarius placements of thinking with social media, with really anything where you have to be a precise, consistent solar kind of figure, that I need to fit inside of, this thing. Like, oh, reels are a big thing. Oh, I need to start doing reels. Everybody
Yeah.
has a podcast. Oh, I need to start a podcast. Oh, people are making little zines now. I need to do that. It's like all of this information, all this data that also the Sun in Aquarius loves can drown out what is authentic to your own
Hmm.
expression. Same with Libra. Maybe it's not so much data or analytics, but when you hear other people get praise or you see other people's art, I actually recently, this is a great solar creative practice that I just started taking pictures, Polaroids. I just recently got a Polaroid, and I think it's a solar thing for several things. I mean, how does a Polaroid develop? Like, it's a shot of light, then you then go into darkness and then it develops. The camera,
Alchemy.
yeah, no, literally. The camera's shaped like a sun, you know? And I
True.
got to this point with my astrology very, very recently where I started to realize I was taking in so much art from other people, so much information that I like did not have my own perspective, you know? And
Mm,
there's
mm,
something about that that's very deeply like air, I think, just in general. And there's elements of, Libra and Aquarius to it, that I have like most recently just like stopped trying to consume most like social media astrology as much as possible, and have been dabbling in other art forms, like just like taking Polaroid pictures, also studying alchemy and just challenging myself to create things without the noise or information of what other people are doing. So
Yeah.
much appreciation tip for people with air signs is stop trying to connect to everything other people are doing and just like kind of isolate, do that Saturn thing.
Yeah, that's so true. I was just thinking when the well, that was more so Saturn, but like when Saturn was in Aquarius, squaring my natal sun, this was really when I was taking like a social media break for like a longer time. Um, for that reason, because I was like, I want to get to know myself alone by myself. I want to build planetary relationships on my own without anybody telling me how to do so. And that's such a precious time. And in a way, that's also very like Aquarius fourth house. But I think that's so important. There's certain aspects of yourself you can only get to know when you are by yourself, which is also a bit like Aries, like I'm gonna do it myself. But seriously, like the trips you take, like alone, is so different than if you take them with other people. And again, there's also courage that is required to that. Personally, I don't have such a hard time doing that. I know there's many people that just can't do things alone, and I feel a bit sad for them because I'm just like, you can get to know yourself in such a different if you just go alone to eat in a restaurant, if you go alone to like if you take yourself to see a movie, like go on your solo date or whatever. There's so many cool things, and that's how you get to know yourself. And it's ironically through getting to know yourself is that also the relationships around you improve because they're based on like that self-knowledge. And I do think there is definitely truth to that quote on like you can only get to know others as deeply as you know yourself. So that's what we have there. I feel like that encompasses all of the dignities.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is a perfect moment to transition to the joy in the ninth house. Um, just,
Yeah.
just you made me think, well, first, the quote that you said, it reminded me, I just have to keep quoting RuPaul. Can't love yourself, how the hell are you gonna love somebody else? You know, that feels very solar in its essence and exactly what you said too. But what you were saying about doing stuff alone, like not only loving yourself, but like traveling, you know,
Mm.
the sun has its joy in the ninth house. And I think there's a lot of ways we could tease out why that is. I really connect to how Adam Ellenboss thinks of it in terms of primary and secondary motion. So planets that are in the ninth, they're moving by degree towards the 10th, but they're getting dragged down by primary motion, you know, how the sky shifts during the day to the angle. And exactly what you said about that self-knowledge, you know, kind of like chasing that like clarity moment of like the zenith, the top of the sky, but ultimately being always dragged towards connection, you know, the seventh house aspect, is really interesting. And as someone that has traveled a lot alone, in Europe, actually, in Germany, in Switzerland, there is so much you learn about yourself when it's just you and a map, especially when you don't have a SIM card. It's just you and a downloaded map on a very old Android phone, with not a lot of public Wi-Fi and really confusing train systems and like four different languages in one country. And like also, oh my God, tangent, Swiss German is so hard to understand, so different than regular
Agree.
German. Like, but there's so much knowledge that's available to you when you do that ninth house thing, you know, travel, philosophy, just figuring out what is that perspective you have and how does that support or like inform those
Mm.
house things of, you know, your reputation, your visibility within the world, you know? How do you prepare yourself by looking at the map ahead of time before you just try to go out in the world? Or do you not, like me, and you just say, I'll figure it out?
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. I was also thinking of you said so much about like the mind before, and that's also so ninth housey, like that higher education doesn't have to mean going to study at a university. It's like the university of life, right? Like getting to know yourself through all these circumstances that give you credentials in a different way. Like maybe you don't have a diploma for a job, but you have life skills, which are extremely important. And again, skills in maybe self-trust, knowing you can actually do a thing, like, and that opens up higher worlds, which is the ninth house, higher dimensions. I always think of Rick Tarnas said something like worldviews shift worlds or something like that. I probably paraphrased it wrong, but that's very like ninth housey in and of itself. And yeah, that like the perspective shift. And yeah, the relationship to ourselves, really, because that's the only relationships that stays consistent forever. We cannot escape our mind, our body. So we have to make sure it's a hopefully a good relationship we have in this incarnate flesh of a body we have here. Like hopefully we have a good relationship in our heads towards us. And I think a lot of the way that we can expand that again is by, yeah, like that life study, traveling, all of that. Yeah,
Absolutely. Can I tell a story?
of course, of
It is
course.
solar, and it's I will start the thesis off as I never believed in myself more than having to learn two languages at once while studying abroad. Okay, so let me paint a picture. It's 2018. I want to make brownies with my roommate, or maybe it was cookies, whatever. And I go to this tiny little, co-op grocery store market thing in Fribourg, Switzerland. And I'm like, I can probably just visually see. I've got my list of things to like make cookies from scratch. And I'm like looking, okay, I've got everything. Oh, the one thing I still need is baking powder. So I'm like looking for visually what I know baking powder generally looks like. It's in a can and lid, and I just can't find it anywhere. So I'm like hyping myself up, like, how do I say this in French? How do I say this in French? How do I get their attention? So there's like, the grocery store person walking through stocking and stuff. And I'm like, excusez-moi, où est la poudre de cuisine? Because I don't know where for. So I said cooking powder because I was like, she like brings
Yeah.
me over to like the thing you make a giant turkey in, like one of those like foil pans. And she's like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, no, and I'm like, how do I describe what baking powder does, I guess? Because if I don't know the word, I have to kind of like get the essence of it. And so I'm like, she's like talking to me in French very quickly, and I'm like trying to think at the same time. So I'm just like not processing, overstimulated. And then I'm like, okay, um, c'est poudre lèvres? And I go like this, because
Oh,
that's
yeah.
it's like what makes things rise.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and she's like, ah, and she like walks over to this like thing of individually measured like baking powder things in like a sleeve of plastic. To me, it reminded me, this is so American, of like little wet wipes that you get after like eating chicken wings. Like they were in like these tiny like packets. And then she goes on this like long explanation about like, oh, like she started saying something about why they're there in the store and that's like new and changed it as if like I had been here before. But anyways, I got it and I left the store and I felt so proud because like I did that solar thing where I was like, all
yeah.
right, I gotta put myself out there. I don't really know how to say it, but I'm just gonna try it anyways. And then again, when I didn't know the word, and I think this has, there's some real poetic symbolism here of the sun relating to the mind. I couldn't use the word. I had to describe the essence of it, right? Like the
Mm, I love
gnosis
that.
of it.
Yeah.
So I had to be like, okay, this is what it does. And then I got it. And I told everyone I've ever met that story.
That's great. Yeah. Obviously, since I'm from here, that's the only way I know baking powder is in this small like sachets or however you say that. Um, but yeah, I love that. I love that. There's um when my mom went to Brazil, this I think when she was in Brazil the first time, because she went a few times. But when she was there the first time, she kind of she had to go to this place of like a friend type of situation, you know? So and the people there couldn't really speak English. And she came and it was like right around Christmas. And then nobody could really talk to her in the language, but they understood each other perfectly. And she was invited and you could talk with the hands and whatever. So yeah, I think there's a lot of like trust. Um, like the world expands when you have faith in it. I don't know if that's the best word, but like if you go down that unconventional path or just like kind of get out of your comfort zone, and all of that. And I think that's yeah, that's very interesting. And it's definitely something that happens like if you and you know, it doesn't even have to be that far away. In ancient times, far distance travel was like, you know, the village, like two villages apart or something like that that you've never been into. So it can be something like that. Switzerland also perfect example. Like I go down to the French part, I'm like, I don't know what the hell these people are saying. I'm in the same country, I don't know. And that's probably how they feel when they come to the German part. So so that's very interesting. And every time that I travel, I have this confidence that I sometimes do not have when I'm here for whatever reason. Because I feel like there you just kind of have to like trust in things unfolding the the way they have to unfold, which I think is also very solar. Like there's a trust in this consistency that things have to unfold. Um, so that's actually very interesting, you know? Because like a lot of like getting to a certain place is like I don't know. I don't want to go too much into like manifestation or anything like that, but I feel like that kind of goes towards that. Like if you know what I mean, like if I'm making sense what I'm saying here, and like having these that trust and faith that you're gonna get there. Um, yeah.
Yeah, you kind of remind me of like the age-old phrase, experience is the best teacher, you
Yeah.
know? And also like there will be brighter days, you know, like having that hope, which is something we often associate with Jupiter. Um, there's an angle of it that I think is very solar in that it's maybe hope isn't even the right word, but just like imagination. I don't know, but just like knowing that the sun does rise and set, like that, like whatever word we could create or have a gnosis of that's like equally consistency and hope, like in one, like
Hmm.
yeah. Oh shoot, I was gonna say something else about oh, traveling. I completely agree, like when you travel you really do take on this sort of like all you have is yourself, right? And maybe there's something that we could even talk about in terms of the sun has its joy in the ninth house. Mercury, maybe some people are thinking, well, why isn't it Mercury if it's travel? Mercury's the first house. And maybe to like the modern astrologer, that might not make any sense. But there's like a lot of wisdom in that, right? Like in terms of maybe we don't speak the same language, are we can still understand each other,
Hmm.
right? By
Hmm.
like that gnosis, by like that like essence of a thing. It is helpful to articulate and feel understood personally with Mercury details and so on, but that's not actually always necessary to have that same sort of like ninth house understanding of things. And I think that's very like, I mean, astrology is also the ninth house. There's so many people, including myself, that start off in astrology like with like understanding the houses through like a list of keywords, you know?
Yeah.
It's really only through building relationships with these cycles, with these planets, with our own like selves and expressions within those that you can have that sense of self, of, you know, belief, authenticity within your own practice. or in a consult with an astrologer, if you're not being authentic, if you're not really sharing, what's going on, it can't have that same depth
Yeah.
and impact. Um, if you're only speaking, chronologically details, like it's lovely to have an astrology client that's like, and on October 5th, I did this, and October 29th, this happened. They're not
Yeah.
feeling through that, if they're not, the sun doesn't often get associated maybe with the word feeling, but the luminaries, I think so much are about that like give and take. It's the moon's maybe the like felt bodily feeling, but the sun is how we emanate,
Yeah.
that how we show it. So, ugh.
Okay, everyone, we're back from a quick break and we're going to continue talking about the sun and the synodic cycles because the synodic cycles are really based around the sun. They're basically the easiest way I could explain what a synodic cycle is, I guess, is the relationship the other planets form towards the sun. And like the interplay. If you've ever been on the internet, maybe you saw these like mandala shapes of like the sun and like the planets in its like for example, a lot of people would maybe know like the Venus sun pattern because it builds a rose. Like the Venus rose is like pretty popular, but every planet has that with the sun in a different shape. And this is kind of what the synodic cycle is like the conjunction, also known as a Cazimi, specifically when the sun conjoins another planet. We don't have that when we talk about conjunctions with other planets conjoining each other. Yeah. And that's kind of like this rebirthing moment that the planets go through. Well, every year, right? Because the year as well, we use the sun really much to measure time in a way. You could say. So the sun is going to conjoin every planet once a year, basically, and do that Cazimi moment. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I think of it, depending if it's retrograde or not, sort of like a
Yeah.
personal astrological new year for each planet, right? Just like
Yeah.
spring equinox with Aries, we've got that reset moment where for our lives, depending on where that planet is falling in our chart, there's like a new story that's seeding, really. It's not visible. We don't know what it is, but there's like a moment of beginning right around that time.
Yeah, and also there's obviously like Mercury is gonna do that a couple of times a year with the sun. Mercury's gonna have a couple Cazimi moments with the sun, and the rest pretty much like once a year, you could say. Yeah, like depending on like the movement, right? Because obviously there are planets that are, and that's kind of like if we think about it in Chaldean order, Mercury and Venus are like a bit faster moving than the sun. So it's like almost they're gonna like catch up to the sun first. But then the other planets like Mars, Jupiter and Saturn, obviously the sun is like faster moving, so the sun's gonna like catch up to them first. And that's also an interesting interplay to look at. And again, there are moments before the Kazemi moment happens, which is the heart of the sun moment, you could say, when the sun kind of like gives up its throne to that planet and this rebirthing moment happens. But before that, we have a phase called, well, the first phase that happens is like a planet is under the beams. And that's really literally, as the name says, is like it's coming closer to the sun, or the sun is coming closer to the planet. And it's like, like picture yourself going to a volcano, right? It's like you're gonna feel the heat from afar slowly, and it's gonna be a bit hotter than if you weren't so close to a volcano. And then it goes into a combust state, and that's really like really close. And it's like way too hot. And that's when the planets are really not doing so well. If they're that close to the sun, but not like in the Kazimi, not in the Kazimi moment yet. Uh, and that's yeah, the condition can definitely diminish, even if you have a strong Venus, maybe you have Venus in Libra and it's like combust the sun in Libra, it's not going to do so well there as it would if it were just Venus in Libra. So this is something that we can note and also look at in our charts if we have something like that. A lot of people are going to have like Mercury in such a phase just because Mercury is always so close to the sun.
Yeah, I really like the metaphor of a marshmallow with Cazimi. You want to roast the marshmallow not in the fire. That would be like, the Cazimi moment where it bursts into flames and then you get char and stuff. You want it to really like sit on the edge.
Mhm.
There, I don't know, and then there's also like the element, like you were saying, the volcano with the heat, where like if you get too close to the campfire, you can feel the hair on your arm burn off,
Yeah,
versus if you're like comfortable in your seat, you can get the warmth of it without the uncomfortableness. So, yeah, when planets are 15 degrees under the beams, or 8 degrees combust on either side, I believe,
yeah,
uh, that's that difference. So, and I think, I don't know if it was Adam or I heard it on Chris's podcast. Someone spoke about, I think it was Adam, that after part when it is, separating 8 degrees or separating 15 degrees, we have to think of it as a living thing. So it's a little bit more auspiciously positive
yeah,
if we
true.
like separating or under the beams, separating, especially when we think about things like progressed charts, as like, we age and there's a day that goes on, symbolic of each year, then we eventually have, let's say, Mercury that's not under the beams once we reach, like if we were born during a Cazimi, 15 years after that, it'll be 15 degrees further. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think um well, let's just give like a metaphor for like conjunctions. I mean, again, with the sun, there are Cazimis specifically, just because again, the sun holds so much power, I guess. It has no name for when it conjoins planets. Um, but when that conjunction moment like happens, or with the sun again, the Cazimi, uh, conversely, again, if we take that like Venus in Libra, Sun in Libra dynamic, because right, the Sun is in its fall in Libra. But if it's in the Cazimi, so then actually Venus would gain a superior position because it like kind of took the throne of that fallen sun and actually is like probably the best that could happen in this instance. But if it's like burning up, not so ideal. So that can happen with a few planets. But yeah, it could also be negative if it's a planet that's in its fall. I don't know, let's just say Mars in Cancer or something like that that happens to be caught up in the Cazimi moment. Then it's like, okay, well, now Mars in Cancer actually is highlighted instead of the Sun in Cancer. Sun in Cancer doesn't have any dignity per se, but just to give a few examples so people can look at it in their own charts or maybe people they know. And do you have anything else to add to that? Or
No, you just made me think about though. I was like, is there or when is the next moment of Sun, Saturn and Aries Cazimi? Because that'll be really interesting. And
oh, that
exalt
will for sure be interesting.
fallen Saturn. I was like, what is that gonna be? But nothing beyond that.
Well, we're gonna get the opposition first, which is interesting in and of itself, I guess. Or no, I guess no, I guess in terms of because like when we enter Libra season, Saturn is already gonna be in Pisces by then. So we are gonna get the Cazimi first before we experience the opposition, which will also be interesting with both fallen planets opposing each other. Yeah. Yeah, but you mentioned like progress charts before. Maybe we can talk a bit about that because that's like a lot of like what you can do with your own chart. Secondary progress charts are basically for people that don't know, one day after you were born represents like one life year. And so 30 days after your birth, whatever the planets were doing would represent like your 30th life year, so to say. And so again, as you mentioned before, if somebody was born with like I don't know, a Mercury combust or something like that. And maybe 5 days later it became Cazimi, then in your fifth life year, you would experience that like happening in your life because your secondary progress chart would get to that moment when the Cazimi happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I really only do that for myself. I find in terms of client work, it can get quite in the weeds just in terms of like, what people are asking. And you also, going back to what we said about vulnerability and, like presence and like what happened in your life, it really does require a lot of introspection to think back on each year symbolically.
Yeah,
Um, Also, frankly, some people's progress charts don't really do that much um, every year, like they'll be
yeah,
like
true, true.
really like loud years where maybe your ascendant changes sign or your sun changes the sign or you have a planet conjunct something from whatever. Like if we're thinking about solar returns, also same thing. Like you always have a solar return and a house that's perfected through annual perfections. That doesn't necessarily mean every year is going to be like a loud, ominous, super change driven type of year. But yeah, solar returns, if we're not familiar with what that is, every birthday, the day you were born, when the sun hits the exact degree, which sometimes it is the day before, or the day after because of leap years and so on, you have a solar return chart that is cast. And I always practice it as anchored within the nativity because we want to consider the natal promise, the context, the possibilities that are like within your chart. And it's more the solar return, so your birthday when you turn 27, how does that activate, what's going on in your fourth house?
Mhm.
Um, so every year, right? So when you're zero, when you're born, you're in a first house year. And I like to think of it very literally as, well, when you're a baby, when you're an infant, you're building your body, right? The focus is you get a name, you get a social security card in the United States, at least. And, you get assigned a gender often too. And then the second house, once you turn one, you're like toddling, you're moving around, you're saying this is mine and this is yours, and concepts of sharing begin, and then
Mm.
you go to school, and then you get like your own room, you get an establishment of who is your family, who is not, etc. So you count 1 year for every birthday, and then it
Yeah.
starts at 12. So yeah, for example, right now I am 27. I am in a fourth house perfection year, Capricorn rising. If you count four from Capricorn, it's Aries. So that means I'm in an Aries fourth house perfection year, and Mars is my time lord because Mars rules Aries. So you would look at Mars in the solar return chart, or at least that's what I tend to do. I
Yeah.
feel like the planet's very highlighted. And also Mars in your own natal chart and how that gets highlighted. And transiting Mars, meaning like, where is it moving in the sky from that birthday to the next, is your Time Lord, meaning it's symbolic of what you are doing or what is the going ons in your life at that time. So I'm very looking forward to Mars entering Scorpio after starting with a Mars in Cancer and a Mars retrograde, and now Mars in
Oh
Libra.
yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, I'm in 2 consecutive Saturn years. I'm looking forward to entering my Jupiter perfection year with Jupiter in Cancer. So I'm looking forward to that for sure. And yeah, solar return charts. I was just thinking, the fact that we celebrate our birthdays every year, we're technically celebrating our solar return. So we're celebrating when the sun moves around the calendar and goes back to that's again, it's give and take one day on and off, depending on the year, because we have leap years and all of that stuff. But yeah, what we are celebrating is technically the sun like returning back to its point. And interestingly, obviously, as astrologers, we also celebrate other planetary returns, but like societally, the fact that we put so much emphasis on celebrating the sun also, I feel like says a lot about like the importance of the sun. And I love that, but I do also vouch for, we should celebrate our lunar returns every month. And also
Absolutely.
rest. I don't know. I love celebrating the other returns as well in whatever ways.
I love celebrating the Saturn return by suffering every day.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. Luckily, we get to celebrate the Saturn return for like 2.5 years and not just a day.
Hot girl Saturn summer with Saturn and Aries.
Yeah. But yeah, as the sun moves quite quickly, right? The sun, you could say the sun moves like a degree every day. Um, and this is also exact how we can track our like secondary progress charts because I would say most people would experience the sun moving into a different sign, even if you're born at like 0 degrees, I don't know, let's just say Virgo or something. Like your sun is at 0 degrees Virgo, you would most likely, hopefully, make it to 30, and then you would experience like your secondary progressed sun moving into Libra. So that is still quite likely, even though secondary progressions work the best or most significant with the moon, just because the moon switches signs every 2.5 days, which equates to, again, around 2.5 years in a life. So it's much easier to track. But definitely a lot of us would experience at least one secondary progressed sun ingressing into the next sign, which again can be very significant. But it's not going to happen every year, as you mentioned. Like that's going to happen every yeah, like 30 years, so to say. Maybe a bit quicker if you have your sun at a later degrees. But from then, if it moves into next sign, it's going to be again around 30 years until you would experience that again. And I do think it's interesting to track, right? Because we could say personally, that's almost like a shift maybe in like life story, life path, what you want to go after, the vision you have for your life. So knowing when that secondary progressed sun moves into the next sign is interesting to track and maybe see yourself like, oh, is something changing in my life right now in my perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I think of like confidence as like a very real shift that changes, and maybe even more specifically, like the sourcing of that. Like my sun progressed into Aquarius. It's at 5 degrees now, so it must have been about 5 years ago. And I think that really lined up with this shift in terms of where, going back to what we were talking about, the sun in terms of dignity in Aquarius, I began to be very interested in archetyping things to understand myself a lot more. Whereas I think before Sun in Capricorn, it was much more like systematic, like I'm following, the track to like get a good grade in school and then go to university and like do all the things that I need to do to have a job, to have blah blah blah. And then it became much more unconventional as to how I wanted to make a reputation for myself. Um yeah, and oh, I wanted to say something about birthdays, because you had mentioned it as like a celebration of the self. And I couldn't help but think about how many people I know with the sun in Aquarius, I don't know if this is true for the sun in Libra, that do not want to make a big deal of their birthday. You know,
Yeah,
like
100%.
if I had a spreadsheet for everyone's birthday, like who cares a lot about their birthdays? Leos. Leos love their birthday. Like Leo suns are all about it. Even I think Aries suns, like, oh my gosh, I remember when the pandemic happened in 2020, and there were so many Aries suns that had like extravagant birthdays. And then COVID hit, like a week before Aries season 2020, and then they were devastated. I like Zoom birthday parties certainly happened, and who knows if the Aries people even showed up, but yeah. Yeah, and I think that goes back to that idea of, modesty and also, oh, I was going to say something about resilience. I'm
Yeah.
the other word I couldn't remember before, and modesty. I think when there's a discomfort, around solar things like self-expression, there's this parallel, it's all spectrum of experience where a lot of resiliency gets formed. And sometimes maybe that resiliency comes from not wanting to be rejected, right? And not wanting to feel like you don't belong here, which is a very real like solar fear. And it's only through like having that, relationship with the sun where we just do it, we just put ourselves out there, easier said than done,
Mhm.
that we can be more resilient around rejection, because I think, the fixed star Regulus also, this is like a very real theme in that star where it's not that they don't, you know, the story of Regulus does not consider rejection. It's about how you respond to that, high and low of rejection. And Aquarius, as the aloof nature, that embodies, would rather witness than
Oh yeah.
so.
Oh yeah. 100%. 100%. And it's true. There's no Aquarius that I know that like shouts that it's their birthday from the rooftops. They're more like, you don't know, like, don't even congratulate me. It's just another day. Um, and I get that. And at the same time, I feel like it's so important to celebrate our birthdays. Like, even if you don't have to make a big party. I've been celebrating a lot of my birthdays very quietly, but I just like to honor that like new start. Again, we get like you don't get a whole like yeah, there are lunar return charts for sure. Like I agree, I don't want to negate that. But like we don't do it as commonly as we do it for the sun. And so for me, I just love doing like a ritual. And that's definitely also how you can connect with the sun on a personal level, is just like really celebrating your birthday. And with that, I really don't even mean like a grand party, if that's what you want to go for sure. But like in a small, ritualistic way, I usually always do like a collage. Like I just cut out things, put out quotes, um, just to like, I don't know, tune into that like next life year and what's awaiting me, and if I maybe see any sort of omen or things like that. So, I really like that. I really like celebrating my birthday in that manner. Um, Again, I love doing rituals. Makes so much sense. They're ruled by Mars and Capricorn in the third house. Like I love rituals, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk more about building a relationship to the sun as you said that?
Um, yeah, I'm just wondering if I mean we could. I was just wondering if we also what we didn't talk about yet is
Mhm.
also like day charts and day sect.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which is definitely also where you could connect to the sun. And if you have a day chart, it's probably very important for you to connect to the sun, but just like a forerunner before we go into that. And just to explain that a bit more, uh, day chart, as the name already says, is basically if you were born during the day. But we have, I guess we are perfect examples of this because we both have the sun in the first house. And so it's basically if the sun is above the degree of your ascendant or descendant. And there's many people that sometimes get confused by this. In my case, the sun is like literally 1 degrees above my ascendant. So it's like very close to that. It also means I was born right at sunrise. And it does mean I have a day chart. If the sun were like a bit below my ascendant, I would technically still fall into the category of having a night chart. Yes, if you have if you have the sun in like the fourth house, you obviously have a night chart. Or if you were born at like 2 a.m. in the morning, like you have a night chart. You were born during the night. And if you were born in the noon, you obviously have a day chart. But just for like people that have this confusion, which can happen to a lot of us. Yeah, just look at like if it's above or below the ascendant or the descendant degrees, and this will give you information. And then based on that, if you have a day or a night chart, you belong. You just have like a sect you basically belong to, and sect really as in like grouping. And so if you have a day chart, you belong to the day sect, which will mean the sun is your like luminary, and then both Jupiter and Saturn are like your team players. Jupiter being your greater benefic, and Saturn being your lesser malefic. Conversely, a night chart, the moon would be your luminary, and then Venus and Mars would be on your team or sect. Venus being your greater benefic, and Mars being your lesser malefic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting to understand where that association comes from. Like Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn are the diurnal planets because they're visible more. There's less change, right? They're
Yeah.
more like they've got that consistency, whereas Mars and Venus go through much more changes with the sun. Um, so, on top of that, I think understanding that role of like team, sect, meaning team in Greek, I think
Mhm.
Robert Hamill talks about the planets as political parties, like in power majority. So it's easier for, if you're a day chart, for example, it's easier for Jupiter and Saturn to pass legislation or, do the planet's agenda relative to like
Mhm.
house sign placement if they're in sect versus if they're out of sect, it's a little bit more difficult for, let's say, Mars to accomplish its agenda. Like maybe I like to think of it as it's a little bit more destructive than constructive, right?
Mhm.
There's an
Mhm.
element of necessary discomfort that you have to move through to achieve what maybe for a night chart person with a Mars is a little bit more streamlined. Or for like Venus and beauty, maybe there's beauty is pain. Maybe that's like a day chart mantra. Whereas a night chart person maybe has a little bit more seamless relationship to Venus just because it's on their team. And so they can accomplish those Venusian qualities a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah, and we see here once again this like importance of the sun and where it's positioned and how much that impacts our whole birth chart essentially and which like team players you have on because this is decided on the sun's position, right? So like if you were born during the day or the night, it literally depends which like team players you have on your team, so to say. No other like it's not based on the other planets, it's based on the sun. And so I think we can just like see this importance of that luminary so much here in like our charts and yeah, again, and the constancy of like why Jupiter and Saturn would be on the sun's team. um I think there's people that think like, oh, but like that's unfair because like Jupiter is like staying in a sign way longer. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, but like you also have like, like you have Venus every year going through all the signs. So I don't think the day or the night sect is like one is better and one is worse or anything like that. It's just different. It's just different. Um, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it really is about the journey, which is solar. I'm thinking about like, Decan walks and laying out the tarot cards as like one, two, three swords, and there's that whole story that unfolds through 10. Understanding the teams of each day chart and night chart is less about like, is this one better or not, but it's just how do you get to the thing that you're trying to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, Let me just think. I had a small segment here about like medical astrology, just because I think it's interesting. And I come from the nursing field, so medical astrology is always interesting to me. Um, just because it can also give us a bit of insight into like constitution and everything. Also, by the way, sorry, do you hear like these kids playing right
No,
outside?
no.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess Zoom has this good way of blending these noises out. But just because they're like being a bit loud here. Because yeah, first school day here, so now they're off. Anyhow, let's get back to medical astrology. So the like in medical astrology, the sun governs like the overall health, again, which is interesting comparing it to the moon, which rules like the body, you could say. And the sun also governs about like the life force and is also associated with our vitality and the heart and the spine and also represents the ability to recover and overcome an illness. Again, makes so much sense with like why the sun would be exalted in Aries, like this ability to overcome. Okay, now they're being really loud. Did you hear that?
But yeah.
Okay, let me actually let's close the window because it's like because otherwise I can't concentrate either. Okay, peace of mind. Youthful, vital kids, I guess, you know. Talking about the sun. Um, yeah, but that's definitely something we could look at in a birth chart, you know, if we would want to see somebody's like condition and also their will at like overcoming certain things and illnesses. And I don't mean that to say that like if you have a weak sun, you don't have a will to overcome illnesses or anything like that. That's definitely not what I want to say. But just there might be like a different way you go on about what you do if you would get a certain condition diagnosed. You know, like the approach would probably be very different if I think of maybe a sun in Libra or what a sun in Aries would do. Yeah, and then obviously also it depends on like which house the sun is in. And maybe we can do like just a few examples, you know, of like, I don't know, the sun in the sixth or the sun in the, I don't know, the 12th. I don't know. Something like that. If you have anything that comes into your mind right now.
Um, I mean, I know in Adam's class we used Martin Luther King's chart. He has a sun in the ninth house in Capricorn on the MC. I don't know anything about his health though. Um, yeah, I don't have any charts off the top of my head. I know a drag queen's chart that has she has sun in the first house, Trixie Mattel. She's a Virgo rising, Virgo sun. Um, yeah, do you have any charts off the top of your head?
Well, not charts, but it could also just be like a general, you know, like a general, like what would a like sun in the I don't know, eighth house kind of maybe look like in somebody's chart, uh, or anything like that. If there's anything that comes to mind, it doesn't have to be the eighth house. It can be any sort. Just so we have like a few examples to give to people, around
Yeah.
like that.
In terms of the medical astrology or in terms of
Not specifically. It can be tied to it, but not specifically. I guess, you know, in the sixth house, it would obviously be a bit more tied to it just because the sixth house is, you know, the house where we could find issues around that.
yeah.
But it doesn't have to be, you know, like if you have the sun in Aries in the sixth house, there could actually be like, again, like a great ability to like overcome hardships and like illnesses. It doesn't mean that you're never sick. It could just mean that you have a great ability to adapt and actually overcome your shortcomings or things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think MLK is a pretty good example I could talk about. So Sun in Capricorn in the ninth house conjunct the MC. And as Adam Ellenboss talks about the sun as the purpose of the plot line, his famous I Have a Dream speech, I think blends with his moon in Pisces in the 11th very well, where, you know, he talks about all these like societal, structural, philosophical examples that are kind of rooted in that very ninth house, also solar thing of understanding, you know, like finding this like, you know, gnosis of like I know your essence and I know we're all here to like be a part of this like greater godly good. Moon in Pisces is that, you know, 11th house also, that aspiration, that dreaming of like how does the environment, the moon, how does it feel to be in that collaborative space of systematic change
Mm,
and
mhm.
function. So that would push the life, you know, towards more structure like that. I think MLK was also I always use the wrong word, a pastor, a preacher, a a
I'm not
religious
sure.
leader of some
Yeah.
kind. So again, you know, a lot of his sense of self and understanding came from those ninth house things. And in Capricorn, through a traditional approach to it, you know, he wasn't a Hindu guru that moved
Yeah.
up or did ayahuasca in the jungle. He could have, that's totally a ninth house thing too, but that's not a Capricorn thing. So you kind of have to layer it, you know, with the
Of
temple that
course. Yeah.
think about the ruler as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Always. I mean, you know, if unless you have the sun in Leo, it's going to be in its domicile. But if you have the sun in any of the other signs, which is more likely, percentage wise, you're going to have to look at what that ruler is doing. So even if you have the sun exalted in Aries, you're still going to have to look at what is Mars, like what is your natal Mars doing in your chart, how it's aspected, what it's doing. If you have your sun in Virgo, you're going to have to look at to what Mercury is doing. Yes, yeah. That's a good example. And in terms of like, I was also just thinking like, Sun in the 11th could definitely be somebody that instead of like maybe putting yourself first, it could be like, oh, I want the vision, like I want the collective to be uplifted, with what I am doing. Like I have this vision for again, like I have a dream. Um like I want to do charity. I want everybody to be feel good. I want everybody to feel seen. It could also be like a coach, like coaching others on how to step into the spotlight, things like that. Yeah, obviously the sun in a different house, I don't know, like a less visible house, like the eighth house, might have a harder time doing that or not feel so naturally comfortable in that spotlight, or might be, and that might actually be like the sun's journey, going towards like these maybe darker topics in life, which we can often find through the eighth house, and, helping people feel seen and visible during a crisis moment where a lot of people like look away and shy away from, but like, no, like an eighth house sun could actually make somebody feel seen in such a moment. So again, there's so many like life paths, and depending on where the sun is in your chart, how the visibility you give to others or through yourself could be expressed through your chart.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's so much, even if you don't know a lot about the signs or dignity, where the chart is in terms of, is it like rising or setting? Is it below or above the horizon? There's just so much there. Like eighth house, Adam Ellenboss talks about that as like, by primary motion, it's again trying to escape the angle, but it's getting dragged down into the underworld, right? So I think
Hmm.
it's also called like the gate of Hades.
The
In
eighth house.
the eighth house, yeah, because
Oh
it's
yeah,
about
yeah. Yes.
world. Yeah, and so in like a modern century lived experience, a lot of that I think is very literal to anxiety, right? We've got this like anticipation of like an ending coming. And so I think in terms of like the sun, let's say the sun in Aquarius, even in the eighth house, there can be this like very real sense of feeling misunderstood because you've got this sense of like what's coming next and
Hmm.
this systematic approach to it, that like you just don't see reflected around you, or you don't feel witnessed maybe, which is a very solar
Hmm.
same way.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I actually have such a perfect book here, The Black Sun. That's like eighth house sun reading material right here. The Alchemy and Art of Darkness, which is, I love that because like so much here in this book is about like confronting the black sun within. Again, I don't want to make this podcast about this book, but I just think it's very fascinating because, again, not everybody might have that golden Leo path in their life. Somebody might have a completely different path that involves a lot of facing and being in the darkness, which is beautiful in and of itself. But again, it's just a misunderstood. It's not a sun in its natural environment. It doesn't make it any less beautiful or special. It's just a different journey. It's an unconventional journey, and that's always what planets in detriment or fall go through. And it gives them wisdom and understanding that planets in exaltation and domicile don't get to have. So that's beautiful in and of itself, to be completely honest.
Totally.
Yeah. So actually, one thing, before we talk about the relationship towards the sun, which we're actually kind of building up towards now, and which is so important with also the interplay of the sun and the moon, is our eclipses. And eclipses are this one thing that I feel like, besides Mercury retrograde, is one of these like astrology terms that even people that don't know astrology definitely know about eclipses. I mean, there's so many people that aren't even into astrology that go like eclipse hunting and want to go see the eclipses, and like they don't care about astrology, So it's this like a real interesting phenomenon that seems to like capture the world and the people. And interestingly, talking about not being able to look at the sun, this is probably the only time that you can actually look at the sun. Even though, right, there's in the ancient times many tales of why you should not do that. But yeah, I'm just thinking of this. When was that? Like last year, 2 years ago? In America, right? There was like this big eclipse. I just remember all these people with these glasses going to view the eclipse. So
Yeah,
that's interesting.
it was visible in Vermont, like over
Oh,
the entire.
wow.
Yeah, my home was in the path of totality, and I walked to
Nice.
the library and watched it. But yeah, you're right. I think there is something really symbolic in getting to kind of see behind the veil, right? And like so much of eclipses have a lot to do with kings or leaders as solar
Hmm.
systems, and usually seeing like their fall. Um, there's like a lot of documentation of like during eclipses, kingdoms that studied that knew
Hmm.
they would have king for a day and like switch a king out. And if what happened to the king, they're like, oh, thank goodness we did that, like who knows? But yeah, being able to see the sun, it's kind of like that's the vulnerability moment. Of course it is, because it's also infused with the moon at the same time.
Hmm.
Mhm. And
Absolutely.
the nodes, which are, what the eclipses happen on, I think it to be an official eclipse, it has to be like 10 degrees, right? Or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
What the nodes are, they're like mathematical calculations for the highest and lowest point of the moon. And
Yeah.
those shift and they actually go backwards in zodiacal
Hmm.
order,
Hmm.
clockwise, which I think there's also some interesting symbolism there of like a clock spinning this way, with primary motion,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then nodes kind of like bringing it back. Like usually we get, for example, we had Jupiter in Aries summer of 2022. A lot of what's happening right now with Saturn in Aries is probably, harkening back to that summer in a Saturnian way. The
Hmm.
nodes kind of do that in a very chaotic, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
the of eclipses, like sudden upheaval. They kind of do that in a different way than it's not a planet, but any other planet.
Yeah. 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 And I was just thinking of this because the sun is stability and consistency. But when there is a solar eclipse, that's like the only time where it's like, and if it's a total one and you can see it, where the day suddenly becomes night, and that's very weird for for that matter. Like in the nighttime, it isn't that like lunar eclipses from like that perspective of like interplay of light and dark is way less weirder than like suddenly the daylight vanishing and becoming sort of gray, which is interesting if you think about it. Like the sun goes away, everything becomes gray, it's like the life force gets sucked out of it. And so, yeah, like thinking in a symbolic manner, that's extremely fascinating to me. And also, yeah, there's like a whole episode the astrology podcast did on the thing you said about like kings and rulers and all of that, because yeah, in ancient times, people didn't yet have like amazing telescopes to look, I don't know how far into the sky and watch the planets, but eclipses you could witness that. And if you witness that for the first time without knowing what that is, just like going about your day and all of the sudden the day turns into night, like that's weird. And I think even like I think it even like shows in animals and things because like the natural circadian rhythm of us humans, because we are kind of tied to the light, right? Like we rise with the sun, so to say. We're awake generally. You could say not everyone when there is daylight, and we go to sleep when there is nighttime. So when that gets like how do you say convoluted? I don't know if that's the right word. It's weird, right? It's weird to our system because like the consistency is like thrown up in the air. Yeah.
Yeah. That was exactly how it felt too. Like when there was totality for 3 minutes where I was, which was a very long time.
That's
Like,
yeah, for eclipses, yeah.
yeah. And what happened, it's very gradual. You see it becoming a crescent and so on. You
Mhm.
see the weird shadows. I think there's something really interesting there too, with like even the shadows from the sun are altered from it as well. And there's total darkness except all along the horizon. There's like little, it almost feels like, it is like a dusk and a dawn
Mhm.
simultaneously.
Mhm.
Like the birds started singing when it came back out. And I was like, this is weird. And I had my toddler with me when we went to go watch this, and she was 1.5 at the time. And it was really weird because she didn't nap that day, and she like always naps. And she was like vibing, Eclipse is happening. She's on the playground at the library. As soon as it got done, we're like walking home. She took a 2-hour nap at like
Oh
3:30.
wow.
I was like, whoa. Yeah. And I felt that too. Kind of like the word I would use is like discombobulated. Like you
Mm,
just have this like
yeah.
disorientation of like when is it? Like you felt like when you first wake up in the morning, you get so thirsty, Like I felt
Mhm. Mhm.
in my body and I was like, this is like I could see, all this skepticism around the baleful rays, as they call it. I could totally see how, as you said, if you didn't know what was happening before it happened, that it could really feel like, yeah, kind of the end of times.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, eclipses always bring such a feeling, regardless. Like a time outside of time, in all honesty. And I also think it's fascinating that, from a technical standpoint of view, I mean, and I'm gonna give credit to the moon here because the sun is like so much bigger than the moon. But from our perspective on the Earth, the fact that it's possible for them to form eclipse, like to come together and like the moon basically being exactly as large as the sun, that's like a bit insane to me for the fact that like the moon is actually such a tiny luminary body compared to the sun, but we have this so like the fact that this even works is like crazy. And I think that's why eclipses are so crazy. Because like that shouldn't be possible, so to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it's a really like healthy reminder in like fate and fortune, right? That
Oh
like
yeah.
so much of that like free will is wrapped up in yeah, both equal parts spirit and chance.
100%. Okay, I think now we can officially go towards the how to of how to build a relationship to the sun. Again, there's a few things we already mentioned. Um, but let's reiterate some of them. Again, a big part, like the best way if you're just starting out. But which might not be you if you're listening to this episode, to be completely honest. But if you're just starting out, just tracking sun transits, every year you get a chance when the sun moves into Aries to follow the sun through all the zodiac signs. And that's like the easiest way you can do that every year and get to learn, yeah, like how the sun moves essentially. And then another part with all of this is, honoring the solstices and the equinoxes, which is like honoring the interplay of when the sun is going into a lighter part of its like place in the zodiac and when it's going to like a darker part. And so there's a reason, in paganism why these things are so wildly celebrated. Like it's really celebrating what the sun is doing. And again, I fully know like that's more northern hemisphere based. But there are also, there's astrologer in the other hemisphere that have more things to say on that. Yes. Also sun gazing and sunbathing, like a very like literal thing you can do to connect with the sun is to go watch the sunset or go watch the sunrise and just like look at it because that's also one of the rare occasions you could kind of look at the sun is when it's like rising or setting because it's not as like as bright as when it's like the middle of the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, learning about the decans, as I said, very recently, I've kind of started to dive more
Mhm.
into. I think it's also just a lovely way to learn more deeply about the sun as it journeys through, not only Leo, but what is
Yeah.
the relationship of this specific decan of Leo. And also, there's different ways to do decan walks, like something I've been thinking about but haven't done because I am Saturn in Aries, so I have so many ideas. I haven't actually done a lot of them. Is like doing a Decan book walk, like finding an author, for example, that
Oh,
has their
yeah.
in that Decan, and then like reading that book. Or you could do a poem, or you could do like a movie if you're like a film fanatic or whatever. Or like apply it to any, non-astrology like touch point that you have. I think that could be a very easy entrance into, feeling out those images and phrases and symbolism related to it. And then ask yourself, well, what is the sun doing when it's in that decan visually? Go look outside, and see how you can, connect that to that experience of reading that book or watching that film. The tarot cards are another great one. I highly recommend Kira Ryberg's guidebook on the decans, where she actually has the tarot cards with it too.
Yeah.
But yeah, wherever the sun is, pulling the tarot card related to that. So right now, the sun is in the third decan of Leo, which means that would be two, three, four, five, the seven
Seven
of,
of Wands.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because fixed is 5, 6, 7, fire is wands. So looking at the seven of wands and pondering, the image there, and you don't even necessarily have to relate it to your life, right? But just like absorbing that and like witnessing it around you. I've also recently been thinking a lot about herbalism too and alchemy and so on, and have been wanting to try flower essences. I've been reading about it, and there's this like pattern where people talk a lot about like sunlight. Like there's got to be like sunlight going into the bowl, and
Mm.
some
Hmm.
people really like advise against like shadows passing over it. So I'm not totally gonna sign off and say I'm the expert on flower essences. I'm not, but it seems possibly solar in the experience of, essence, gnosis, right? And also like how important the sun is to that entire practice.
Oh,
I
yeah.
also I also think hair is a very solar, because it is, I think about this all the time, so like your reputation, like as a person that lives in Vermont, which is basically a giant village, like everybody knows everybody unless you live really south, like in like a different part, like central Vermont is just like one giant village. I have very recognizable hair. So like people will know me just from that. Actually, my
Oh,
partner,
yeah.
it's a fun story. My partner, who also has very recognizable hair, he has Mars and Leo, um, saw me on a dating app. And because I have very like colorful, outstanding hair, he was like, "Do you work at the coffee shop I work at? Because I think I recognize you from your hair. I hope that's not creepy, but I love your hair." Anyways, but yeah, I think a lot about the main, right? Like Leo, that association with the sun, also the rays of the sun. Like not only caring for your hair, maybe that's probably a little Venusian too. It's both, but also just like making your hair a form of self-expression, I think is a really beautiful way to connect with like your sun. And that'll look different, for everybody based on your sun sign. What is your sun gonna look like? Once my sun ingressed into Aquarius, that's when I started to do this more zany sort of eccentric hair
Oh,
color. But before that,
interesting.
I was beige girl. I had strawberry blonde, kind of whatever hairstyles, and didn't brush my hair a lot either. So, um, yeah. And then my last one that I thought about was, like taking pictures of yourself, self-portraits if you're an artist, or just looking in the mirror. I think the mirror is technically associated with the moon, but we've obviously spoke to this sort of harmony they offer each other. If
Hmm.
the room was dark, you couldn't see in the mirror though, so it
Yeah.
takes sunlight to see yourself. I love looking in the mirror. I have like at least three mirrors in every room just because there's like something really powerful about witnessing yourself in your home. Um, and for selfies, so my partner has the sun in Aquarius, and he told me the year that he was single before he met me, he challenged himself to take a picture of himself like anytime he was doing something
Mhm.
really fun. Because he realized after his other relationship ended and he tried to get on a dating app, he had no pictures of himself. Like,
Yeah.
so he was like, what am I going to do? And I was like, wow, that's just so Sun in Aquarius, to have to like make a concentrated effort to make a photo of myself for this specific outcome. But I love taking selfies. Even if it's mundane, I think it goes back to the birthday celebration. Like, you have a birthday every year, and that doesn't mean you should shrug it off as just another year. Like, it's special. Like,
Mhm.
even the quiet moments deserve a picture.
I agree. Yeah, I was laughing before because I was thinking of, I know quite a few like Aquarius suns, and I feel like all of them have like profile pictures from 8 years ago. They never changed it. It's like groundbreaking when they do. It's like, what happened? Like you changed your profile picture. That's so funny.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I feel like most of the solar people I know, myself included, I change my picture constantly.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Which is
a lot of times, yeah.
isn't it
I
funny?
agree.
Constantly, consistently. Are those the same thing? Like to
Oh.
constantly versus consistently, they sound similar, but there is
Uh-huh.
an element maybe where there's a nuance to
Hmm.
spectrum.
Yeah. Wait, there was something else you said before that I wanted to say something about, but I don't know what it was anymore. Wait, which points did you make about, oh, like the hair thing? Yeah, there's also, gosh, I feel like almost all Leo suns I know have like a curly hair mane. Obviously not everyone, okay, not every Leo sun, but like so many that I know. Um, yeah, yeah. And I also used to do so much with my hair. Um, there's like no color I did not have my hair in, which is weird now because I've been having my natural hair for so long and I don't really plan on doing anything with it. But I did so many things and when I was like in my like Japanese like school thing, whatever, in Japan, like 2019, I made this bold decision to really go like pink. And again, I had other colors, like I had blue and green and everything, but I really wanted like pink. And that made me so like recognizable, like I was the girl with the pink hair. Um, and that's interesting, right? Like as you said, like people like, oh, that's the girl with like that hair. So it is interesting how it may, or like, oh, it's the bald person. They don't have hair. So yeah, and just how, yeah, like the difference it makes, right? Like, it obviously some people have conditions, they have to go bald. Some people do shave their hair off though, and that like really changes how they look and how they are perceived in positive or negative ways, whatever. But yeah, that's definitely something very interesting. And about the essences, I was also thinking of like there's at least in summer, and I feel like it's a ritual you can do around summer solstice where you can make like sun tea, uh, which is like a similar process. You essentially just gather herbs, and an amazing herb, which is totally a sun herb, is like St. John's wort,
Mm.
because that like pops up when the summer solstice comes along. If you notice that, like go and check that out. And it literally is a sun herb. I mean, it's like it's to like bane depression, which is the sun. And like, gathering something like that, maybe even calendula. I feel like that's also very like sunny flower. Like just gathering that and putting it in a water and leaving it out in the sun when it's a hot day. And that's how you get sun tea. It's like the opposite of iced tea, essentially. Um, yeah, but you could obviously freeze it afterwards and then you could still get sunny iced tea, which is probably also super delicious. But that's also a way you could connect um, To the sun, yeah.
Yeah, I think rosemary is also a pretty good solar herb. I have no
Mm.
idea why it's a herb. I'm very new to learning about stuff like this, but I love rosemary. I had one other thing to say about the hair. Is that all right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's kind of two things. The connection to your hair. I think that is the very solar part of it. And you're so right that, again, it's on that spectrum of, if you're too connected to your hair. I have this really good friend, actually, a Leo rising, ruled by the sun in Taurus, who went through this very interesting evolution where her people in her life got so connected to her hair and they were like only like seeing her for her hair in her words, and it made her like really uncomfortable. So one day just randomly she did shave her hair, and I think
Mm,
we see this in a lot of like femme people where they have this like almost uncomfortable relationship with how beautiful their hair is, that they feel kind of objectified for it.
mm,
And then they go through this process of saying, like, no, you're going to see me. And I don't think I'm being seen. And because there is the possibility, just like the sun, of being overshadowed or burnt, like invisible because of your hair. Like, people only see your hair.
yeah.
Um, it also made me think about drag queens who shave their head for the goal of, being able to like adorn wigs.
Hmm. True.
Or art, purposes of like other self-expression in art and just like not, resonating with that. And then the last thing, this is a personal story. So just recently I went swimming, and because I have colored hair, the more I get it wet, the more it will, fade out. And my partner has super, super curly hair, like coily hair. And we have talked about this like all summer, like, oh, like, should I get my hair wet? Like, then it's like I have to shower again or I have to, put in product, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
We're like, wow, like, this is such a theme of like authenticity. Like, it's only summer once, right? Like, we should
Hmm.
enjoy summer. We should go swimming, not because we're worried about if we're going to have time to shower or how quickly my hair is going to fade until I have my next appointment to dye it. Like, there's an unhealthy attachment is my point of like getting too
Mm.
attached to your hair and making that too much of your reputation to the point where you start to restrict your own expression. There's some healthy balance in between where you have to be moving with like authenticity, and not just this like external expectation of like my hair needs to be perfectly coiled and not frizzy at all, or my hair needs to be a bright blue because I intentionally did that. It's also part of that solar quality to acknowledge cycles. Even if the sun itself doesn't go through a cycle, it fosters them. It's a part of all cycles.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. There's because for me a huge chunk of because like people just really knew me of the person that like constantly changed her hair. And so it almost became my brand, and like super Scorpio, like going through transformation after transformation. But like going back to natural was like for me back then such a like radical thing. Like you like conversely with other people you would say like, oh, like coloring your hair red all of a sudden would be the radical thing. For me the radical thing at that moment was to let my hair grow out again and like say goodbye to that. So yeah, it's interesting. It's yeah, hair is very, very interesting. Um, and again, as you said, like the attachment about it that we have. And I was just thinking of another reality TV show, America's Next Top Model, and how like, these like I don't know if you watched it, but like, the hair makeovers were always like this like huge thing of like who's gonna get their hair redone and like how it's gonna get redone. And obviously there's a lot of like drama there, and I'm sure they did a few things just for the sake of like views and drama and not because it was actually useful. But the fact that it was this like such emotional thing, for many people, like letting go of something that is so consistent, you could say, is definitely very solar. Yeah. I don't know if you have anything more to add to hair.
Well, I will say another chart example that makes me always think of a first house sun, like we do have, is Trixie Mattel, the drag queen, who's like so iconic for her giant hair.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
a lot of drag queens have giant hair, but I think if you look at the timeline of Drag Race, Trixie Mattel was first on season 7, and she had like catastrophically huge, like giant and yeah, so again, it'll be different how that expresses. If you have a first house sun, maybe you have a very literal your own body association with hair, or if you're ruled by the sun. But if you're, an Aquarius sun, like my partner, he often worries so much about what other people think of his hair.
Mm,
So having maybe just an
true.
awareness where that association falls by house, by sign, by dignity can help you kind of tap in more what is the connection to hair and the sun for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, I think you did a great in real life example, like um when your secondary progressed sun like progress, like that's when you saw a change. And that's probably also something people could look at in their charts if it already happened or maybe is about to happen, that could definitely influence yeah, maybe a hair change. Um yeah, totally. Great. Is there anything else we want to or like anything else that comes to mind for you right now?
No, I think we've said it all, or most of it.
Cool. Amazing. Well, we're gonna close this off how we close off every episode, which is by chanting or reading the Orphic hymn to each of the planets, which is also, again, a beautiful way to connect to the sun. Which, oh, by the way, like, I don't know why we did not mention that before. It completely flew over my head. But, like, just connecting to the sun, you could sit down on Sunday, which is, it already luckily has it in the name. Sunday is the day of the sun. And if you want to take it even a notch further, you could sit down during sun hour, and that's when you could like create an altar around the sun or something like that. And I always like to chant the Orphic hymns towards the specific planets to kind of like invoke them or just like honor them. So that's definitely something you can do. But yes, I'm gonna let Colly read the Orphic hymn to the sun, and this is how we're gonna then slowly close this off.
All right, so this is the Orphic Hymn to Helios, translated by Thomas Taylor on the Adolastarum website. And I'm an English major, so if I should be able to do anything, it is something very long out loud. Okay. Hear golden Titan, whose eternal eye with broad survey illumines all the sky, self-born, unweird in diffusing light, and to all eyes the mirror of delight. Lord of seasons, with thy fiery car and leaping coursers, beaming light from far, with thy right hand the source of morning light, and with thy left the father of the night. Agile and vigorous, venerable sun, fiery and bright, around the heavens you run, foe to the wicked, but the good man's guide. Over all his steps, Proportius you preside, with various founding, gold and lyre. 'Tis mine to fill the world with harmony divine. Father of ages, guide of prosperous deeds, the world's commander, borne by lucid steeds. Immortal Jove, all-searching, bearing light, source of existence, pure and fiery bright, bearer of fruit, almighty Lord of years, agile and warm, whom ever power reveres. Great eye of nature and the starry skies, doomed with immortal flames to set and rise. Dispensing justice, lover of the stream, the world's great despot and over all supreme. Faithful defender and the eye of right, of steeds the ruler, and of life the light. With founding whip 4 fiery steeds you guide, when in the car of day you glorious ride. Propodeus, on these mystic labors shine, and bless thy suppliant with life divine.
Great, amazing. So this is the hymn to the sun, or again, Helios, both of like the moon is also like directed towards Selene. Um, so they just have like these archetypes connected to them, in case anyone's wondering. Why it's like a bit different than the Orphic hymns to the planets, which are like specifically like the planets, but the luminaries have Helios and Selene. But yeah, this is basically it. And now I just want to go to like, yeah, you know, sorry, my words are like missing. But basically, is there anything you want to offer to people? Where can people find you? Um, Anything you want to have linked in the description below? That's the time now.
Yeah, so I'm Colly. You can find me on Instagram as Baristarwitch. I don't know if by the time this comes out, my website will be redesigned, but nonetheless, I have an Acuity booking link, which is baristarwitch.as.me, which we can link in this description. And since we talked about the sun, I thought it would be fun to do a special offering on solar returns if you've got a birthday coming up, where we could talk about the cycles ahead, like we referenced. Or if you don't, we could also just talk about your sun placement and, what solar experiences you have, both signatured in your chart and lived in your life. And I'll give y'all a discount code of just sun, just type sun in, and it'll be 30% off. So we can chat. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message on Instagram. Um, and I look forward to talking to you all. And thanks so much for hosting. And this has been such a great conversation.
Great. Yeah, it was lovely having you here. Um, And yeah, I love that. I mean, solar return charts are like such an amazing like year in like check-in to like get a birth chart reading for the year ahead. So, grab that if you want that. And yeah, other than that, this podcast exists on YouTube and on Spotify, depending on where you're listening right now. You can switch from one to the other. Some people find it more convenient to listen on either of the platforms. Regardless, liking this video helps out immensely, and writing any comment also helps out immensely, more than you know. And if you're shy about that, we're also, I'm sure you're also happy if people shoot you a DM if they have any questions or they just want to share anything. I love reading through that. Like any encouraging words are always also welcome. And yes, this is under Resonance Astrology. You can find me under resonance.astrology on Instagram. Otherwise, the podcast is available again on YouTube and on Spotify, both under Resonance Astrology. And yeah, all of that will also be linked down below in the description. And yeah, with this, yeah, kindly want to thank you if you made it this far. It's been a long podcast, and I applaud you. If you made it through one sitting, like hats off to you, because I'm sure people will be listening to this in like, multiple increments. But yeah, again, thanks you for joining, Colly. It was wonderful having you here as well, and I love doing it with you. And yeah, goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.